Welcome back, VA user. In today's video, we are going to cover the workflow. This is one of the often requirement from many of the customers, even from the partners, and also the students that I have. They want to go through with the workflow setup and specifically how to set up the approval nodes into the VA system. So in today's session, we are going to cover how to set up the approval. By default, into the VA system, at most of the places, you would be able to see the complete button that used to trigger the workflow at the background. Apart from that, there are some other workflow types that would be exist into the Vienna Advantage, and we are going to learn one by one all those. So as I have mentioned, that one of the workflow that everybody wants to know is how to set up the approval nodes. Let's say you have a sales order, and onto the sales order, if the sales order is more than $500, then there would be a approval, and that has to be triggered to your manager or to your supervisor or to a certain specific role. So how you would be able to do that setup into the Vienna Advantage? So let's go into the system and we'll see how we would be able to set up. Right now I'm at my landing page, and I'm going to open the workflow setup screen. And from the workflow setup screen, you would be able to make the modification into the workflow. Here, the important thing is you must have to be aware about the tables and the columns. Since into the VA system, there are many of the windows prepared at the level of a table. So I would say a workflow to be configured at the level of the sales order, then we just need to aware of that which table it is. So as I have memorized all these, but you must have to learn, like the C order table is associated to the sales order, but at the top of the C order table there are many other windows like purchase order, sales order, sales quotation, blanket purchase order, sales order, blanket purchase orders. Then you have vendor RMA, customer RMA. So all these windows build onto the top of C order. Now the question is how this segregation is there, because at the background it is just the data. Now how the system knows that a particular record belongs to a sales order, to a sales quotation, to a purchase order, to a blanket purchase order. So there are many of the checkbox taken on this table, and when the records created by the user at that moment of time, a particular checkbox is marked as true, that represents that a particular record belongs to a sales order or to a purchase order. So that is how we use to identify. Okay, so I'm not going to confuse you here. This is one of the important part that you must have to learn. So into the application dictionary sessions, I would showcase you all these details, that how you would be able to identify. And even at the end of this session, we are going to tell you that how, you know, in terms of the sales order or in terms of the purchase order, even the table is common, then how you would be able to identify a certain record belongs to a sales order and purchase order. That will enable you to create the workflows, and specifically when it comes to the approval workflows. So let's open the workflow setup and then we'll create one approval node. So I would say workflow and workflow setup. So we just need to move on here, and the workflow belongs to a C order table. So I would say process underscore order. So here is the sales order. So you would be able to see it belongs to C order table. And if I want to make sure that I am changing the right workflow, then you would be able to check the table name here. So here the table is C order. Okay, and even if you want to make sure that how you want to identify whether this this is the right workflow linked or binded, then I would showcase you a few things here that helps you to understand. So let's log in with the super user, and here it is. Now first you will open the menu since the window is visible at the menu. So I will open the menu configuration, and thereafter I would search for the sales order. And here in terms of the sales order, I just want to see the windows. So let me mark it. So here is the window sales order. Now from the sales order, you can zoom to the sales order screen. Now move on to the tab. Now there is the first tab that belongs to C order table. So you would directly zoom to this table and then move on to the column. And here at the level of the column, you would be able to see the complete button that used to be referred as doc action. So we'll move on and we'll see the doc action. So move on to the next page. So here it is, the doc action. So this doc action is nothing but it is the complete button that you would be able to see there at the top of the sales order. So that is basically the complete button. So here onto the at the level of the status, you would be able to see the complete button. So this complete button is nothing but it is a doc action. Okay. So now from this doc action, you would be able to zoom to the particular job, and from this particular job you would be able to see your workflow, that which workflow you are calling. So it is the process underscore order, and that is the same workflow we are going to make the changes. So here is the workflow process underscore order. Okay, so we are going to change it here. Now next move on to the access tab. So the relevant access is already provided here. We'll move on to the node here. So there would be certain nodes belongs to the system. I would say, by default, there are 4 nodes you would be able to see in all the workflow. These are the 4 default nodes. Do not make the changes in these. Now, the rest you want to increase, like if I want to increase an approval somewhere, instead of making such a changes, I would refer the tenant, the idea sync tenant in which I have logged in, and I would create my notes here. However, you would be able to make the changes at the level of the system. So as I have showcased you, I would be able to make the changes and introduce a new node. Now the difference is, if I will generate the workflow node, and if you have two tenants or the 2 clients configured onto the same database, in such a cases, that approval node will be executed for both the clients and both the tenants in a similar manner. But if you wanted that, you want to configure 2 tenants in one database, and you want that in one tenant or one client it would work in a different manner, while into the another tenant and another client it will work in a different way. In such a cases, we would generate our approval nodes at this particular place, and thereafter you would be able to make the changes, and that is specific to the tenant. Okay, so I would generate here, let's say I want approval, so I would say approval to manager, whatever the name you want to give. So I give the name in brackets, and thereafter the another important part is what is going to be your node here action for this node. So my action is going to be the user choice, and then I would move on to the workflow in charge, and I would say who is the workflow in charge for this. So you would be able to configure the workflow in charge. So here is if there would be any human, then you would be able to, let's say I would say the workflow in charge is ideas inc admin, and I would say role. So it is going to be the role, and I would say it went to the ideas inc admin users. Okay, so I would save this, and I will utilize this as my in charge. So let's refresh and we'll say ID sync admin role. So when you select this, it means that all the users under this particular role receives this workflow notification, and as a result to that, the user has to, any one of the user can approve that. Okay, it can be, specific to the human and then to the organization as well. So you would be able to do it accordingly. So once it is done, thereafter we just need to select the column. So if you have a certain column called is approved, or something like other column, then you would be able to do. So, I do not have a specific checkbox available. So this is one of the checkbox that is, I believe, not used by anyone, but you would be able to create something like is approval 1, is approval 2 as a checkbox, and you would be able to select that. So instead of doing that, I'm selecting the is printed that is already available. Otherwise, I have to create uh, that particular checkbox. So, or I would create that so that the clarity would be there. So let's move on to the database, and in this database column, I would say uh, is approval 1. So you need to create a system element here. So I would select here and I will say is approval 1, or I will say project specific. If you want to create a node, then you would say, okay, for approval, for approval. Okay, so I would say this, I would say this, yes. So that all depends during the configuration of the project. Your technical team would be able to give this names properly. So let's move on to the database, and I would select this, I would select this. Then how much is going to be the length is going to be the 1. There is a checkbox, and hence I would use yes or no and save this, and then synchronize. So it is synced. Now I would move back and I will refresh here, so I would be able to select my column. Okay, so I would be able to save it in this way, and thereafter, if you want that the details would be showcased at this home level when the approval would come, then I would be able to set a few more things here by using that is and the invoke by is the sales rep ID who is going to invoke this. The zoom window is going to be the sales order, let's say. Then I would come here, and if I wanted that more details to be printed, so there would be a field. So here is the text template, so you would be able to define your text template. So let's say I just want to define my text template as sales order approval. I will copy it, I will say here. Then if I want to say AD underscore, I will say tenant. Then you just need to write down here AD underscore client underscore ID at the rate organization. So at the rate AD underscore ORG underscore ID at the rate, then which is going to be the business partner or the customer. So I would say at the rate C underscore B partner underscore ID, how much is the grand total. So grand total is going to be the grand total Okay, and I would save this. Now let's move on to the workflow again, and we'll set it up as workflow approval. Okay, so my node is set it up. Now what do we do? What we need to execute when this has to be executed? So we just need to define it as a transition. So we'll come here and we'll say, okay, now I wanted is it will start from start node, since it is defined here as a start node. So it would start from the start node. Then the next is going to be the doc prepare, and there is no condition. So it means that the next node to be executed by the system is the doc prepare. Let's move on and we'll see doc prepare, and what is going to be the next node. So the next node says it is the deactivate node, since it will not be executed by the system. So the next is going to be 10. Then okay, so this 10 has to be executed and there is no condition. So after the 10th one, so let's move on to the next. So this is going to be the node that will be executed by the system next. So we'll move on to the create scheduler, and then we'll move on to the transition. So here it says after complete. So I would say no, it is not likewise. I just want to make it as 100, and I would say instead of this, my next node that would be executed by the system is approval to the manager, and then my condition is going to be, as I have mentioned, that grand total is greater than 500 is going to be the condition. However, I would be able to define a number of conditions. So my next condition is going to be, and it is going to be my column sales is equal to true, and is return TRX is false. So once I will define this, it means it represents the node has to be executed for the sales order. Okay, so SO TRX is the sales transaction, return TRX is basically, it is not a sales return transaction. Okay, so it is, if it is true, then it means it is a sales return transaction. And there would be some other notes you conditions you can apply here, is that its sales quotation should be false, his blanket sales order should be false, his blanket purchase order is going to be false. So in such a way you just need to define the conditions. So right now I'm not defining all those conditions. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So now it says that that 10 number has to execute only when this condition is true, otherwise the complete has to be executed. What happens if this condition is true? Then after this, what to be executed? So it is going to be the complete node, since my complete node is the end node. So we'll move on to here and we'll say the transition, and we'll say okay, so it has to be going to be the complete one. So there is no condition. So if you can see, we have defined everything here, and based on that we would be able to now execute, and we'll see whether the workflow is working all well or it is not working properly, right? So we check the transition. So what is the standard user workflow? It's 10 number. Okay, and then we have the prepare, and here we do have, okay, so let's move on and we'll execute it. So I would log in now with IDS Inc user, and we'll create one of the sales order and we'll see. Okay, so let's open the sales order window. create a new record. So it is going to be the standard order. Then we have a customer here, and we'll say planes holding. Most of the things gets automatically populated by the system. Then we'll say this, apply, move on to the order line, create a new record, and I would say it would be against a certain product. Okay, so my product is going to be, I would say, this one. It is going to be 10 quantities. There is a GST 5% of the tax applied. Let's say 20. So we just need to execute, so and make sure that our total is going to be, the grand total is going to be more than 500. Now once it is done, so thereafter we'll move on. So our total is 8,000, it is not 500, and we'll say complete. So right now the period is closed, so we'll open the period. So let's move on to, it is not accessible here. So let's move on to the idea sync admin once again. I'll move on to the period control here. Then we have 23. Period is going to be September. I'll say process now. Okay, it is done. Now we'll move on to idea sync user, and we'll complete the sales order which we have prepared. Complete. Okay, so there is no access to this row. So there would be the issue here with the role setup. So let's move on and we'll update the role. And let me log out here, open with idea sync admin and provide the access of the process. We'll come here at the level of the role, and then idea sync user, move on to the process, say new, read and write access to be provided, yes. Just a minute guys, let me verify this and then we'll process it ahead. Okay, so there was some role access configuration wasn't up to the mark, so I have did that. Now let's complete this sales order, and now you can see the message suspended for approval to the manager, and my document action for this is becomes in progress. Okay, so you would be able to see the document status as in progress. Okay, so the sales order is not yet completed. Now what to do? We just need to log in with the idea sync, since idea sync has the access of the idea sync role. So we'll see, and here the idea sync admin role, and when we'll come here, and you would be able to see based on to the configuration the system is showcasing that under the TNN called idea sync organization HQ, then the customer this, and the grand total is this. There is approval. So when you click on this, you would be able to see this screen where it says that it is started, when to prepare, then this node V009 and the create order schedules executed, and it is pending for the approval of the manager. Now the manager would be either say yes or no. If the manager wants to zoom and verify the entire record, the manager would be able to zoom to that particular record by zooming it, and can take the printout and verify the entire things. And once he gets satisfied, then that person can say okay. If you want to reject, then you would be able to reject, or if this user wants that it would be forwarded to CEO or CEO, they would be able to forward it using the forward option. So right now let's say yes, and I will say done. So once it is done, my sales order so is completed. You would be able to see here my status for my sales order that was prepared by IDS Inc. user. Okay, it is updated by IDS Inc. admin as a result of approval. So you would be able to see, and this way the approval notes can be generated and can be binded with the workflow. So that is how you would be able to set up. Now there are going to be various other actions at the level of the workflow. So you would be able to utilize all those. Okay. So we are going to cover all these into the next video. Till then, thanks a lot. Bye bye.